47 scientists stood in the sterile observation gallery of the Nexora Biotech Research Campus, arms crossed, watching through reinforced glass. Their badges gleamed. Their lab coats were crisp. Their minds were sharp and certain and fully convinced of their own understanding of the world. Mason Chen walked in wearing a faded Carhartt jacket with a coffee stain near the left pocket. Behind him, 6-year-old Emma gripped a small stuffed rabbit named Bolt, his button eyes catching the fluorescent light. The rabbit's fur was worn smooth in places from being held. The laughter started before Mason even reached the observation window. Someone whispered that it looked like show and tell. Someone else made a joke about Casual Friday coming 3 days too early. A third person said something that made everyone laugh harder. Then Dr. Catherine Wells, CEO of Nexora for only 14 months, stood from her chair and pointed directly at the door. The gesture was sharp. It was final. It was the kind of gesture that gets repeated in office conversations for weeks afterward. Mason did not flinch. He did not argue. He did not attempt to explain. In exactly 18 minutes, everything Catherine Wells believed about his background, his credentials, and his place in the world would prove to be a catastrophic and very public mistake. Stay with this one. It earns it. Press play because the truth you are about to see has been hiding in a garage for 3 weeks. It was 9:47 in the morning when the humiliation began. The campus had been built in 2014 as a temple to precision. Polished concrete floors, glass walls. Everything designed to project certainty and order and the confidence of people who had never been told they were wrong about anything that mattered. Mason had been a maintenance technician there for exactly 8 months. He fixed the centrifuges when they drifted. He replaced the cooling systems when they overheated. He cleared the clogs from the lab drains. He was the man nobody thought about because he was the man who made it possible for everyone else to think about their work. He was not supposed to be in the observation gallery. He was definitely not supposed to be in the observation gallery with his 6-year-old daughter and her stuffed rabbit. Catherine Wells was not a cruel woman. That was important to understand about her. She was a woman who had been given power too quickly and had not yet learned the difference between authority and the performance of authority. She had been named CEO 14 months ago. The board had questioned the decision. Half of them had believed she was too young, too untested, too willing to ask questions instead of issuing commands. The other half had believed she was the future of the company. There was not much middle ground when it came to Catherine Wells. She was the kind of person who created that space simply by existing in a room. That morning, she had decided to prove that the doubters were wrong. She had decided to prove that she could make hard choices. She had decided to prove it by making an example of someone. The project on the table was called Helix 9. It was a peptide synthesis protocol that had consumed $2.4 million and gone nowhere for 16 months. 47 of the brightest biochemists in the country had touched it. 47 brilliant minds had come to the same conclusion. The protein was degrading. It folded wrong. It degraded within hours instead of remaining stable for the weeks needed to bring it to market. The board was asking questions, very specific questions. Catherine was desperate for a victory, and Cameron Whitmore, the head of research, had whispered a suggestion in her ear like a man who had been whispering suggestions into the ears of CEOs for a very long time. He had said, make an example of someone. Show you are willing to cut people who do not belong. Show strength. Cameron Whitmore was 48 years old. He wore a watch that cost more than Mason's annual salary. His hair was silver in a way that looked intentional. He had spent 6 years building the infrastructure of Nexora's research division. He had patents. He had influence. He had investment in maintaining exactly the power structure that existed. Catherine Wells, with her questions and her newness and her willingness to see things differently, was a threat to that structure. So he had suggested she use her position. He had suggested she make an example, and he had suggested that the example be someone nobody would defend. Mason had noticed the problem 3 weeks before the morning of his humiliation. He was in the upper lab repairing a centrifuge that had begun to overheat. The machine was in the corner, and he was working on the cooling line when he saw it, a printout on a nearby desk. The peptide sequence, the degradation curve, the data that 47 brilliant people could not make sense of. He saw what everyone else had missed. The buffer temperature was drifting. Not much, less than half a degree, but enough. Enough to unravel the whole thing. Enough to ruin the project. Enough to explain 16 months of failure. He did not say anything. He finished the repair. He drove to Emma's school. He made her pasta with butter and salt. Bolt sat on the kitchen table while she ate. That was all 3 weeks before 9:47 on a Thursday morning. On Thursday at 9:47, Catherine Wells walked into the observation gallery with her authority sharpened like a blade. "Mr. Chen," she said. Her voice was not uncertain. It was the voice of someone who had been told to find her authority and was not going to wait to wield it. "You are not scheduled for this facility. "You have no credentials to be here. You have no business being in this space. You will leave immediately." Mason set down the supply box he was holding. He looked at Catherine Wells once. Not with anger, not with hurt, with the kind of patient acceptance that comes from understanding exactly how little was being understood about him. "I'll go," he said. Emma watched from her small chair in the corner. She was holding Bolt against her chest. His long ears drooped. She was 6 years old. She had lost her mother when she was 3. She had learned early that the world could change in a moment, that people could leave, that things could be taken away, that fathers could be told to go. "You will not return to this campus," Catherine said. "Not to maintenance, not to any division. You are terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out." Mason buttoned his jacket. He took Emma's small hand. They walked to the elevator together. He did not look back. The scientist watched them go. 47 people saw a man who did not fight back, and not one of them understood why. In the car on the drive home, Emma held Bolt very tightly against her chest. Mason had been widowed for 3 years. His wife, Sarah, had died in a car accident on a Tuesday evening while picking up groceries from the store. One moment, no warning. The world had changed in the time it took to answer a hospital phone call. The nurse had been very professional, very clinical. She had explained the extent of the injuries. She had explained that there was nothing more they could do. She had asked about his insurance. After that, everything became about Emma, about keeping her steady, about keeping her small hands and her frightened questions and her need for consistency at the absolute center of everything he did. A job did not matter. A career did not matter. A promotion or a title or a salary did not matter. The only thing that mattered was that Emma had a father who came home, a father who made pasta with butter and salt, a father who knew exactly how tight to hold her when she had nightmares. Sarah had been a researcher herself, not at Nexora, at a pharmaceutical firm across the city. She had loved precision. She had loved the way a problem could be solved with enough patience and the right methodology and the right mind. Mason had learned that from her. He had learned to think in patterns, to see what was wrong when everyone else was looking at what was supposed to be there, to understand that sometimes the answer was not in what you added but in what you changed about what already existed. When Mason was very young, before Emma, before even meeting Sarah, he had been someone else entirely. At 19 years old, he had been recruited into work that had no name. Defense research, classified, biochemical engineering with a security clearance and access to projects that did not officially exist. He had been extraordinary at that work. So extraordinary that at 28 he had walked away from it completely. He had decided that the weight of what he knew, the weight of what he had built, the weight of work that was never spoken about, he could not carry it into a marriage. He could not carry it into fatherhood. So he became someone new. A maintenance man. A man who fixed machines. A man who came home to Emma. A man who nobody needed to know anything about. That afternoon, sitting in their small kitchen with the window open onto a yard with a dying maple tree, Mason made Emma an early dinner. Macaroni and butter. A slice of apple. A cup of milk with the lid off because she liked to drink from a real cup. She pushed the food around her plate. Bolt sat on the table beside her water cup. "Why did the lady make us leave?" Emma asked. "She needed to show that she was in charge," Mason said. "It was not about us. It was about her." "Did she not like us?" "No. She did not like that she did not understand something. And sometimes people think that being mean helps them understand. It does not. Understanding requires asking questions. It requires listening. It requires patience. Will you find another job?" Mason looked at his daughter. She was 6 years old. She had a stuffed rabbit that had cost $12 at a drugstore. She had lost her mother when she was 3 years old. She had learned very early that the world was not stable, that things changed, that people left, that nothing was permanent except her father's presence in this small kitchen. "Yes," he said, "I will find another job." The job search took 4 days. On the 5th day, Mason set up his workbench in the garage. He had equipment there, tools that had come with him from a past he no longer claimed, from a time when his name and his credentials and his expertise had all been real in ways that mattered very much to people with government credentials. He had kept the equipment even though he had not used it in 9 years. Not to use it, simply to keep it, like a man who keeps his grandmother's ring even though he will never wear it again. On the 6th day, Emma was in the garage with him. She brought Bolt. She sat on a small stool while Mason worked on a project that had nothing to do with any job. It was personal. It was the kind of work he had not done in 9 years. Peptide synthesis, buffer chemistry, the exact problem he had seen on Cameron's desk. "What are you making?" Emma asked. "I am trying to fix something," Mason said. "Something that other people thought was broken." "Can you fix it?" "I do not know yet, but I can try." 3 weeks into working in the garage, Mason had solved Helix 9. He had the formula, he had the complete methodology, he had the proof of concept sitting in a small glass vial in his refrigerator, wrapped carefully in a cloth. He had not told anyone. He had not planned to. He had simply worked. Every evening after Emma was asleep, he worked. Every weekend morning before Emma woke, he worked. He worked with the kind of focus that comes from understanding something deeply, from seeing what others could not see, from knowing with absolute certainty that he was right. But on a Tuesday afternoon, Dr. Eleanor Price called. She was the board chair of Nexora. She was 74 years old. She had been in the biotech industry for longer than Mason had been alive. She had a long memory. That long memory included a young biochemist named Mason Chen who had disappeared from academia 16 years ago without a trace, without explanation, without announcement. "I heard you left the company," Eleanor said. Her voice was warm. It carried the weight of someone who knew things. "I was terminated," Mason said. "That is not the version I heard from Cameron Whitmore." Eleanor had been reading through historical research grants one evening. She was trying to understand why the company was struggling with the Helix 9 problem. She was trying to see if there was something in the past that could help illuminate the present. That was when she found it. A name on a classified defense contract from 2008. Same name as the newly fired maintenance man. Same name as the young researcher who had written 3 papers that were so far ahead of their time that the entire industry was still trying to catch up. Still trying to understand what he had known. Still trying to replicate what he had discovered. "I am calling you because I believe Cameron Whitmore has fabricated his credentials," Eleanor said. "I am calling you because I believe he has stolen research, and I am calling you because you are the one person at this company who can prove it." Mason did not tell Eleanor about the vial in his refrigerator. He did not tell her about 3 weeks of work in a garage. He did not tell her about the solution to the problem that had stumped 47 people. He said he would think about it. Instead, he made Emma dinner. He made her pancakes on a Saturday morning at 8:15. The butter melted into the ridges. The maple syrup was warm. Bolt sat on the kitchen table. Emma held her fork the way he had taught her, the way her mother had taught him. The world was still unstable. But right here, in this kitchen, with this child, with this small stuffed rabbit, the world was exactly as it should be. On Monday, Eleanor called again. She asked him to come to the campus. She asked him to bring whatever he had created in the garage. Mason said no. Eleanor asked if he understood what would happen if Cameron remained there on Wednesday. Cameron would steal that work just like he had stolen everything else, and Mason would have allowed it to happen. Mason brought the vial to Eleanor's office on Tuesday at 4:00 in the afternoon. He brought the methodology. He brought the documentation that was so precise it could have been submitted as a patent application on that day. Eleanor looked at the work. She did not speak for a very long time. Then she said, "Catherine Wells needs to understand what she did, how much she failed, how completely she was wrong." "I do not want a job," Mason said. "You will not get one, but you will get the truth told, and you will get an apology. And you will get to see whether this company values integrity or whether it protects people like Cameron Whitmore." Eleanor moved to her phone. She called Catherine Wells. She asked her to come to her office immediately. She told Cameron to wait in the hallway. Catherine arrived first. She did not recognize Mason at first. Then she did. Her face went pale. "Catherine," Eleanor said, "this is Dr. Mason Chen. Not the maintenance man. Not the unauthorized visitor. The actual Dr. Mason Chen. The one who solved Helix 9 in 3 weeks in his garage while you were preparing to build your career on Cameron Whitmore's lies." Eleanor showed her the vial. She showed her the methodology. She showed her Cameron's signature on the original proposal. The proposal that Mason had created 9 years ago. The proposal that Cameron had stolen. "I terminated him based on a false briefing," Catherine said quietly. "You did, and now you will fix it." What happened in the next moment was the most important moment in Mason's life since Emma was born. Catherine Wells stood from her chair. She walked to Mason, and then, with all 47 scientists watching through the glass walls of Eleanor's office, she knelt to his height. She placed her hand on his arm. "I was wrong," she said. "I was wrong because I listened to a man who had already proven himself capable of lying. I was wrong because I chose authority over truth. I was wrong because I did not ask enough questions. I am sorry." The room was very quiet. Not the quiet of nothing happening. The quiet of a room where everyone had stopped pretending. Where everyone had understood that they had made a mistake. Where everyone had understood that the man they had laughed at was the one person in the building who had actually known what to do. "What happens now?" Mason asked. "Cameron is referred for federal prosecution. I am recommending changes to our research oversight. And I'm asking you to come back. Not as maintenance, as the head of Helix 9, as what you actually are." As a partner? Only if Emma comes to work with me sometimes, Mason said. And only if she can bring Bolt. Every day, Catherine said. 2 weeks later, Mason was in the laboratory with Emma. She was 6 years old and very small in the big space. Bolt was held in one hand. Her other hand held her father's. The scientists who had laughed at him were now asking him questions. Real questions. Serious questions. He answered them quietly. He did not claim credit for what he had discovered. He did not explain himself in unnecessary detail. He simply showed them the work. He showed them what he had seen. He showed them how to see it themselves, how to understand, how to think like someone who was not afraid to question what everyone else accepted as true. Emma held Bolt tighter. "Is this where Mama used to work?" she asked. Mason looked at the laboratory. It was sterile and precise and full of people who had dedicated their lives to understanding how things worked. It was the kind of place Sarah had loved. It was the kind of place he had abandoned 9 years ago. It was the kind of place he had been dragged back to, not by ambition, but by the simple act of refusing to let a lie stand. "Not exactly," he said. "But she would have liked this. She would have liked that we are here. She would have liked that you are here." Emma looked up at him. She was still very small. She was still holding Bolt. She still had a life ahead of her that would be full of people who did not understand her. Full of spaces where she did not belong. Full of moments when authority would be wrong. Full of times when she would need to hold tight to what she knew was true. "Daddy, I think Mama would like that you are fixing things again," Emma said. "Even when people told you to stop." Mason held his daughter's hand tighter. He did not respond. There was nothing to say that would match the perfect simplicity of what his 6-year-old child had just understood about the world. About truth. About what it meant to know something and to have the courage to speak it. He turned back to the peptide sequence on the screen. The numbers were precise. The work was exact. The methodology was his own. Bolt sat on the edge of the laboratory bench watching everything, his long ears drooping slightly, as Emma tapped at the data on the monitor to show one of the scientists something she had noticed about the protein fold. The work continued.